Dana, Martha, thank you so much. Peace talks on hold is where we begin today. The White House confirms a new round of U.S.-Iran negotiations scheduled to take place in Switzerland today has been postponed. The delay comes as Israeli forces and Iran-backed militants agree to renew a ceasefire after a fresh round of fighting overnight. But a senior Israeli source told Fox if its forces are attacked, it will respond. I'm John Roberts in for Harris, and this is the Faulkner Focus for this Friday morning. Israel hit more than 100 Hezbollah-linked targets, including command centers and launch positions. The IDF confirmed before the attacks that 4 of its soldiers had been killed in southern Lebanon. That's what sparked the outrage in Israel. This map shows the security area the IDF is trying to enforce to protect its border communities. You can see where Israeli forces advance, the security zone line, IDF strikes, and where Hezbollah reportedly attacked. The Institute for the Study of War posting with this take: Iran's threats to collapse the agreement unless Israel ceases operations and withdraws from Lebanon likely reflect a deliberate effort to compel the United States to pressure Israel to end operations. Iran has surely observed reports in Western media that President Donald Trump prioritizes preserving the deal and has pressured Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to limit military operations in Lebanon. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance yesterday responding to critics of the Iran deal.
They certainly recognize that the United States has great leverage. Will that ultimately lead to a change in behavior? I don't know. I've seen skeptics of the deal. People say the Iranians will never change their behavior. Well, maybe that's true, and if so, they don't get any of the benefits of the bargain. But isn't it worth trying?
We are covering this from all the angles. Foreign policy expert and retired Navy Captain Brent Sadler will join us in moments. But first, to Lucas Tomlinson with the latest from 1600 Pennsylvania. Lucas.
Good morning, John. President Trump with some harsh words this morning to critics of this memorandum of understanding who compare it to the Obama nuclear deal. Trump saying his style of negotiation is with 13,000 airstrikes and a months-long naval blockade. And also taking to Truth Social to post the following, John. The president writing, quote, "The war has diminished Iran. It doesn't any longer have an air force, a navy, anti-aircraft equipment, radar, or practically anything else. And yet the Democrats say that Iran is better off now than it was 4 months ago. Can you imagine getting away with that? How stupid can some people be?" President DJT. It rhymes. Overnight, Hezbollah launched an attack on northern Israel, as you mentioned, John, killing 4 Israeli soldiers in violation of the ceasefire. Israel launched retaliatory strikes, prompting Iran to cancel its trip to Switzerland to meet Vice President J.D. Vance to begin those negotiations now that the 60-day clock has started. Recall, Lebanon was included in the memorandum signed by President Trump at Versailles. Vice President Vance acknowledged maintaining this ceasefire will be very challenging.
We expect Hezbollah is not going to be firing rockets and firing drones at the Israelis. And we also expect that the Israelis are not going to be going wild in Lebanon, right? Both sides have to honor their end of the deal. Now, as you guys know, sometimes these ceasefires are a little messy. The President of the United States said this a couple of weeks ago, that a ceasefire in that region of the world just means they're shooting a little bit less at each other than they were before.
Now, in a sign of potential collateral damage from the G7, John, Italy's prime minister appearing irked on social media after President Trump reportedly told an Italian news outlet she was begging him for a photo and a one-on-one meeting at the G7. John?
Yeah, that relationship hit the skids pretty quickly. Lucas Tomlinson for us at the White House. Lucas, thank you. Well, the title of a Wall Street Journal editorial board piece reads, quote, "What Iran gets from its U.S. deal, even if it gives nothing." It goes on to say, quote, "The memorandum of understanding gives Iran plenty before securing commitments of substance on the nuclear program, let alone on missiles or proxies. That's U.S. leverage given up before it's needed most." Brent Sadler is a retired Navy captain, former Pentagon official, and senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation. I was really surprised to see that Iran called off the first day of negotiations. Brent, how about you?
Well, thanks for having me on. And I think we should expect that it's not going to be a straight line or a smooth path in executing this MOU. And clearly, the Iranians are going to now try and test the administration, both with things like this trick right now of not showing up into Switzerland, despite saying they would, and also to try to kind of test the bounds on what they can get away with from U.S. pressure on the Israelis in Lebanon, especially when a response from the Israelis against an attack by Hezbollah is balanced and warranted.
You know, I saw J.D. Vance at the briefing yesterday, and he was asked about these so-called gentlemen's agreements that aren't written down between the United States and Iran. And I'm reminded of that the Al Wilson song, The Snake, where the woman takes in the snake because it's cold and it's freezing, and eventually the snake ends up biting and killing her. I'm thinking, how is this any different from that?
Well, yes, there's lots of analogies and the duplicity of the Iranians in this negotiation. The key thing is the United States maintains significant leverage, and it's also, I think, enshrined inside the letter of the MOU. The key thing is the execution, is using that leverage. And so I think the vice president's response on the issue of Israel and Hezbollah and Iranians trying to pressure is warranted, and stress that, measured response by the Israelis is expected. And certainly Hezbollah has not lived up to its obligations decades now to disarm and to be a normal power. And clearly the Iranians need to be called to the mat to say they need to stop supporting these organizations. They need to stop funneling weapons to them, not only just to Hezbollah, but also to the Houthis and their proxies in Iraq.
So the president is having a back and forth over social media with the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei. The president posting this morning on Truth Social, quote, "We didn't meet out of desperation. Iran did. They are finished. We'll play out the 60 days. They get no money, not 10 cents. The president was reacting to a statement put out under the name of the supreme leader, which said, quote, "As you have heard, a memorandum of understanding was signed between the presidents of Iran and the United States. On the way to reaching this stage, the officials made many efforts out of compassion and goodwill. And of course, it was the president of the United States who, out of desperation, used all kinds of levers for this purpose." How do you negotiate with people like this?
You ignore that and you basically just respond to what is in Americans' best interest, and as necessary, you use a little military compellence to make sure that they move in the right direction. So if the Iranians try to mix those words with actions that are contrary to the MOU or attack shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, I think a hammer, a much more significant one in the past, is warranted. That perhaps that third day of strikes that the president put on hold.
So the reason that Iran shockingly pulled out of the first day of peace talks in Switzerland today was because of renewed fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. 4 IDF soldiers were killed. Vice President Vance issued this warning to Israel yesterday. Listen here.
Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world.
So that was a warning to Israel to say, go with Donald Trump on this deal. Don't pursue your own agenda. But Israel is saying, look, if we get attacked by Hezbollah, we're going to go back after them. Now, Hezbollah and Israel have this morning initiated, or at least renewed, a ceasefire. But the fact that Lebanon's even a part of this irks a lot of people.
No, I think there's a risk in this, allowing the Iranians to conflate the conflict resolution, the negotiations with the U.S., to include Lebanon and Hezbollah. But there's also an opportunity there, and that's where the administration, I think, could seize this, and that is press the Iranians for good behavior from the Houthis, as well as their proxies in Iraq and Hamas, as well as Hezbollah, to honor obligations and that Iran no longer arm them. But I think a responsible military retaliation by the IDF against Hezbollah if they're attacked is warranted, and nothing to be indicated that the administration's not supporting that. But I think the Iranians need to get the message that if they keep pressing on this, then they're going to be, I think, making yet another strategic miscalculation.
All right. Brett, good to get your thoughts on this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.